This is the jpeg2RAW podcast. I'm Mike Howard, and I'm broadcasting from the basement of Knob Studios here in sunny and hot Atlanta. jpeg2RAW is a photography podcast for the amateur photographer. You can find us on the web at www.knobstudios.com, and you can contact the show by emailing us at podcast@knobstudios.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Flickr, and Twitter by searching for jpeg2RAW, or just follow the links on our website. All right, well, it's 8 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm your host, Mike Howard. This is Tim Kemperle, and this is jpeg2RAW, show number 11. How you doing tonight, Tim?
Very good. How about yourself?
Doing great, And I guess, let's start into something. I have posted something on Facebook. I think, are you a member of the... I have two things. I didn't know which one I was supposed to do, so I created both. I have both a group and a page for jpeg2RAW. So I get confused sometimes as to which one am I supposed to post from. So often, if you're in both, you get both. But I had posted something tonight, and that is, or maybe yesterday, that is to go to iTunes and leave a comment on the show. And one of the things that helps move a show up in iTunes is comments. So if you go out there and you leave a comment, and if you're not going to leave a good one, then forget you hearing this. But if you're going to leave a good one, then go out there and leave a comment. It doesn't have to be anything long, just something there. And if you find me on Facebook, I actually have a link to it, so you don't have to go out there and find it. There is, both the audio and the video versions of the show. It'd probably be best if we leave them all on the audio, but feel free to leave them on the video too. And that's the other thing. If you're subscribed to the show, there's the audio version. Then there's two video versions: a video large, a video small. And the video large is when I say large, it's probably large in file size, probably not that large in actual resolution, but it is double the resolution of the small one. So if you subscribe to the audio one, and you'd like to see some of the pictures or what we're talking about, you can subscribe to the other one also. So what's the weather like up there now, Tim?
It's actually gotten a lot cooler. The mornings when I leave for work, it's around 45, 48 degrees, and I think today it got up to the low 60s maybe. So it's definitely cooled off a lot.
Has the leaves started changing yet?
Some trees, they really haven't gotten the color, but I lost a lot of leaves on some trees. But I'm hoping this weekend or the weekend after this, they'll be in full color. Okay.
And, it'd be nice. I haven't got this yet, but it'd be nice if we had a photographer on the show who was very knowledgeable, expert, whatever, in fall, in landscape shooting and shooting fall colors. Have to work on that, although they're not out there that long. We haven't got ours yet. I think we're probably a few weeks off from getting those good fall colors. But once they get out there, you don't have but a few weeks or so to.
You might have a week or two at best.
It's not going to be forever.
Now, your trees don't lose all the leaves down there, do they, in Atlanta?
Well, we got different kinds. We do have some that are evergreen, the pine trees that
right.
Their leaves forever. But we also have, Bradford pears. We have, which have beautiful colors. We don't want to show my lack of knowledge of tree names, but we don't have we have a number of trees that lose their leaves. Yes, maples and that kind of stuff. So what I would do though, if I was going to shoot that, is I would probably go a little bit north of here, up into the Georgia mountains, what little mountains we have, and there's some beautiful scenery up there.
Yeah, I got to go further up north if I want to see anything really good. I mean, Long Island, where I am, is not the best. You got to go up north into Maine, New Hampshire, and they've already probably passed their peak.
Andy S. And just saw this in the chat. Andy S. is coming from Scotland. That is awesome, Andy. When I think about the if I won the lottery and wanted to go tour the world and go to different places, that is definitely one of the places I'd love to go. That I kind of have a weird range of things. I'd love to go to Alaska, Iceland, the whole Ireland, Scotland area, New Zealand, and Australia, and then maybe some other places.
What time is it over in Scotland anyway for you, Andy? It's got to be pretty late.
I think he had said like 1 a.m. or something like that.
I appreciate you staying awake for us.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get into this week's news. And one of the things I'm going to stay away from, is the new iPhone. And I know that there's a lot of Apple people out there that just love the iPhone. I am not an Apple fan, and I don't want to offend any of our listeners, so I'll just stay away from that. I don't know a lot about it to talk about it anyway. So, I was looking out there in the news, and there's not a lot that I would pick as top news. Adobe has released a couple of apps. One for Photoshop for the Android phone, if you have it. I don't know if they have an iPhone version or a Windows Phone 7. And there was another article that Flickr has got a new app also for the Android. Have you looked at either one of those?
I haven't looked at it for the Android because I have an iPad and I use Flickr on that. But I'll tell you, I cannot be more unhappy with the iPad app. It's meant for the iPhone, so it does not look good at all on the iPad. They have not updated it. It almost seems like Yahoo has forgotten about Flickr, and I actually really like the site. And
yeah, it's a shame with Yahoo. They've done a lot of good stuff, but they seem to not be able to keep up with the pace. I don't know. I'm not. I don't. They probably missed out whenever Microsoft tried to buy them. They should have gone with that. That was a big mistake.
Oh boy, they lost a lot of money on that one.
Yeah,
they could have made a lot.
And another piece of news, and I don't have this here, but if you are on Google Plus, and I think that's open now, so you don't have to have me send you an invite or anything like that. You can get on there yourself. If you're on Google Plus and you've ever tried the Google Hangouts, they've now added something called screen sharing and desktop sharing, whatever they call it. And that you can do that in Skype if you only have two people online. If you have more than two, you can't share the screen. I want to try that on Google Plus, not tonight on a live show, but at an off time, and see, because that would, what I would love to be able to do is have you share your screen, me share my screen, and go back and forth.
Right.
And I don't know if Google Plus has that, but if they do, that is an incredible feature, and not just for us podcasting, but with my mom, there's times she'll be in Photoshop or she'll be just in Windows and have a question, and it's so much easier to help her if I can see her screen and say, no, your other left, and help her through that. So, and I would think that from depending on the resolution, the quality of it, from a photographer standpoint, if you had like a little hangout and you could share tips on Lightroom or Photoshop or something like that, that could be very helpful too. So I don't know if that's rolled out everywhere, but look for that in Google Plus. Google Plus is really where I'm spending a lot of my time these days. That's there's some Facebook groups that I spend some time in, but Google Plus is taking up more and more of my time.
Well, I'll tell you, if Google does that, I mean, you think about it. What is it? Go to My PC or Go to Assist. That sounds like that would actually take the place of it. I mean, those are paid services, and Google doesn't charge for any of these services, so that would be great. I agree. I fear my father is asking for me to give him a computer. I'm like, if I give him a computer, all I'm going to do is be over there explaining it to him.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think some of those things allow you to take control of the computer. I'm not sure that you can do that with this. I think maybe we can just see each other's screen. But it's something we're going to try, because coming in a few weeks, I think we're going to do a show, if not before then. But for this show, we're probably going to do it in the Google Hangout format. Do you have Are you in Google, right? Google Plus,
Yes,
right?
yes, I
Okay.
am.
So for the people coming up to live chat and everything, it won't be that much different. They'll still come to the same place and see the same thing. For the participants, there is, it'd be different for us. So so that leads me into the next piece of news, and that is, when I first started the show, I had Jenny and Kristen on, and that kind of kicked the show off, and then I immediately had Philip, and then I think Andrew Morris from Australia, who's also on the Home Tech Show, and then it got difficult to have guests. The problem with building a podcast from the very start is getting it going. Just like any, this isn't a business, but like a business, it's hard to get it moving. Once you get some momentum, it can get going. I think getting Tim to come on several shows and then to be co-host was a major milestone. Ashley last week I really enjoyed Ashley.
Oh, absolutely.
Ashley had wanted to come back on again this month, and I don't know what, I don't think she can now, but she really wanted to come back on this month. She's getting married this month, so I've asked her, hey, why don't you just focus on that? Your business, you're getting married. That sounds like enough for this month, and we'll talk about you coming back on. We'll talk about you coming back on, maybe in November or something. But the other thing is, and I'm sharing this new, Tim, I don't think you even know this. I have 4 guests lined up. I have next week. We have, and I'm only going to pronounce the first names because I'm horrible with pronouncing names. We have Rachel next week. We have Morgan, the 25th. The 18th. We have Morgan the 18th, which is the week after. We have Ali, I think that's how you pronounce his name, from Google Plus. He's an excellent photographer on Google Plus, and we're going to talk about HDR. And he had, if he knows a lot more about Google Plus than I do, and is getting a lot more use out of Google Plus than I am. So I think we can all learn something from him. And he's a photographer, so we're going to learn about it from a photographer standpoint, not from just the tech, but from a photographer standpoint.
Right.
So he is on the 25th. I just lined that up today. And then the lady I've been trying to get on forever, and that is Kathleen, who actually used to live about a mile from me, and we've never actually met. I just found her photos online and loved them. She is going to be on November 1st. Yes. So the next 4 weeks, we're going to have guests, and each one of them is going to be, very exciting. And I like talking to Tim. I like talking about stuff between the two of us, but it's also exciting to have fresh blood in here. And I think it's going to be an exciting next 4 weeks. So
prevents us from talking all the time also. I mean, Ashley really filled in a lot of voids for us last week. It was great.
She did. And, one of the things I'm doing is I'm not posting as much as I should out there in the forums, even though I'm out there by myself. I have been posting when I book somebody. So I book somebody for a show. I go and I book on a calendar, who's going to be on. Well, I need to go back through and back into that post, and I can put in their website, their blog, if they have Google Plus, their Google Plus, and their Facebook page if they have that, so that before the show, if anybody who wants to go see them, people can go out there and and see them. Because I think each one is exciting in their own right. Morgan is the creator of that f-stop. I think Rachel is co-creator of that f-stop frenzy group. And I was looking at some of Morgan's photos, and it looks like she will do just about anything to get a photo. Stand in water, stand on the top of a ladder. I mean, she looks like she is into it and going to get that photo no matter what it takes. Kathleen is just an incredibly creative newborn and infant and pregnant mother photographer. She is just excellent, very creative. And then, like I said, Ali on the 25th is going to be talking about HDR as well as Google Plus.
Well, I definitely like HDR, and I've tried it here and there, but that's one thing I'll definitely be interested in.
Yeah, HDR is one of my favorite things to shoot now, and I cannot wait to hear from him and hear what kind of tips he has and all that kind of stuff. Andy S is mentioning Kobe Brown has some good stuff in Google Plus. Yes, Kobe Brown has some excellent stuff out there. Kobe Brown. There's one of the things I've been finding on Google Plus is the level of incredible photographers out there. If you are interested in photography, there's a lot of places you can go. Andy mentioned 500 Pics. That's an incredible place too. I think the one thing with Google Plus I like is not only do you get those incredible photos, but you do get some interaction with the photographers.
Right.
And that's incredible too. So the other kind of news I have along with that we just talked about is I've been thinking about doing sort of an informal JPEG2RAW Hangout edition, and that would be I'd have to set like a time or something like that, or so people would know when to do it. But it would be where I just open up a Hangout in Google Plus, and whoever wants to come in, we just chat about anything photography. It'd be an open format. We can talk about anything. You can come in for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, the whole show, whatever else. I think that it's limited to 10 people that can be in there. And we would just have a general discussion. And if I can get the screen sharing thing to work, that would be just a real added benefit. Something I'm thinking about and looking for some feedback on and see if anybody would be interested. Tim, I think you're a member of that F-Stop Frenzy group along with me.
Yes, I am.
There is a lot of good discussion that goes on in that group. And that's kind of what gave me the idea is, that's kind of the day in, day out where they're discussing things and helping each other out with different photography questions. I think it would be a nice supplement to that to have a group hangout where you get instant feedback. You bring up your question, especially if you can share screens, you can show it to somebody, and discuss different things right there.
Well, that sounds like I'll tell you, you have some great ideas. I don't know where you keep getting all the ideas.
I don't sleep.
You must not.
I don't sleep. It was a busy weekend booking 4 guests. Of course, I'm going to burn through all the 4 guests and then have nobody after that. And it's back to Tim and I. So Andy said that's a great idea. One of the things is picking a date and a time and getting all that set up. So that's we're still working out. If you're interested in doing this, look for me on Google Plus, what is it? Follow me on Google Plus. Let me know that you're from our show, because I think I'm up to about 1,200 followers now, Tim, and I have no idea who most of these people are or how they found me. So if you're coming from our show, let me know. You send me an email, podcast@jpeg2raw.com, so I know who you are and I can add you to a special JPEG2RAW circle. And Andy's saying, nor do I. I don't know what he's talking about. So, Tim, you're having a little bit of video issues now. Oh, you just went like super fast. Say something?
I'm right here. I'm assuming you can hear me perfectly, but there's a
little bit of a lag, but that's okay. So I guess let's go ahead and get into the main topic, and that is camera settings. This is kind of going back to the basics. Every once in a while, the show is basically, the thought of it was it's for the beginning photographer. So every once in a while, we want to go back to the beginning photographer. I think these next 4 weeks will be a little bit more than just a beginning photographer, because all 4 of these are going to be pro photographers. We'll try and keep them with the mindset of the beginner. But for tonight's show, I want to go back to the beginner photographer. And what got me thinking about this was my wife and I went for a walk recently, and she has a little point and shoot. I had bought her a Luminex. What is that? Luminex FZ35. It's a
you call that a point and shoot?
Yeah, I mean it's you can't remove the lens. It's not something you can fit in your shirt pocket. But I'm holding it up to you, but nobody in chat can see, nobody in the show can see it. Okay, so here is the little point and shoot my wife has. Obviously, it's not something you're going to fit in your blue jean pocket. It's not something you're going to. Crap! I still got this wrong. It's not something you're going to fit into a shirt pocket, but it's a point and shoot. It's all self-contained. She can go through the menus and take it, take photos fairly easily. But, when we're out there shooting, she started asking me some questions. And, one of the things I was telling her is, you got to get out and shoot more often. The only way you're going to learn this is by going out there and shoot more often. And, one of the things you should do when you first get your camera is you should, go through the entire menu and get out your manual. And, I typically like to look at the manual as a last resort. So I will go through the menus by myself and then only refer back to the manual when I have a question. What does this thing do? What does that thing do? So, I often when my mom and I get together, she has, I think, a Nikon D90. That's one of the first things I do is I take her camera and I start flipping through her menus to see, what kind of weird settings she has in there. And sure enough, she's going to have some weird setting. What are you doing this? What are you doing here? So I thought that tonight what we can do is kind of go through our settings that we use. Tim uses his on the Sony. I use mine on my Nikon. And, what you have may be a little different, even if you have a Nikon or a Sony. Each camera is a little bit different. But this is kind of some of these things I'm going to talk about are somewhat generic across all cameras. So we can talk about that and then talk maybe a little bit about why we choose what we choose. So, Tim, do you want to go first, or how do you want to do this? So I got your Sony pulled up. Let me change the screen so we can kind of see your menu. I don't know how you wanted to go through it. But, so let me tell you before you get into yours, maybe this will help out, is mine has two basic areas that as a photographer you need to worry about for taking pictures. And that is, it calls it the shooting menu and the custom setting menu. I have a couple others, like setup menu and playback menu, and I think a recent settings. But the two places that contain the most information that I need to change on my camera is the shooting menu and the custom menu.
Right. Mine's called the record menu and then custom menu.
Okay. So looking at your record menu now, and you want to do yours first, or you want me to go first?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll go through mine. And the first one that comes up on mine is the aspect ratio. And for some reason, I never went to the widescreen format, which would be 16:9. So I keep my camera at 3:2, which is the same as you would have had on a regular 35 millimeter frame. So I leave that set as is. The next one is the quality, and it gives you the choice for JPEG plus RAW, or just RAW, plus a couple of other ones. I use straight RAW. I've been using RAW now probably for the better part of a year to year and a half since I really started using Lightroom as my my software for editing the pictures afterwards. When I was using Photoshop, I didn't use RAW except once in a while, and back then I was doing JPEG plus RAW because to edit every picture in Camera Raw was painful. Lightroom has made it so much easier that I don't even shoot in JPEG anymore. I like the option of having all the detail out there.
Now, before you move on, so the first thing I see there is image size. So you must set it to large. You always go to large, I would imagine.
Oh, actually, you know what? Now that I look at it, since I have it set in manual, I don't even have a choice.
Okay.
It's automatically set to large for me.
Okay.
And that, I didn't even realize that. I skipped right by it because it's grayed out.
I wonder if that's because if it's in RAW that setting is not an option.
I'm going to take a look at that right now.
Now,
yep, that's it.
With there's another option you have with RAW, and this one is somewhat controversial, and that is, if you're shooting RAW, you do have the option on many cameras. It appears that you have one on yours, and I know I have it on mine, and that is whether to shoot compressed or uncompressed RAW. So, I think if you can help it, don't shoot compressed at all. Cards are getting so cheap these days, I just recommend getting a bigger card. Sometimes actually compressed RAW will slow the camera down a little bit as it has to calculate the compression.
Right.
And
I agree. I mean, I shoot with a 16 gig card and an 8 gig card. I have yet to, since I went to the 16 gig card, I've never had a problem with getting pictures on there. So I just shoot straight RAW, uncompressed.
Yeah. So I would, if you're not willing to go all in with the RAW, then probably something like RAW plus JPEG fine is the way to go. Because
Right.
the thing is, you may be saying today, I'm not ready for raw, because it is a little bit more. There's a little bit more to it if you don't have Lightroom. Um, but you never know. Later down the road, you may have taken that shot of your son, shot of something that you really want to come back to, and if all you have is a JPEG, that's all you're ever going to have. But if you shoot the RAW too, you can at least go back to it. So the other thing I should mention as we talk about a lot of these things, if you shoot RAW, a lot of these settings may not have any impact at all because you can completely undo them later. It will be like the basic settings as as you import it into your software, whether it's Photoshop, Lightroom, or something else. It'll read those settings and apply those settings like sharpening and tonal compensation and all those kind of things. But you can undo them all in Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom, which uses Adobe Camera Raw or some other programs. But it kind of gives you a baseline for some of these things. So as we talk about them, keep that in mind that if you shoot in RAW, some of these things really don't have an ultimate impact.
Right, and I was always of the opinion where in some of the creative settings that come up, like the I don't know, sepia or black and white, I don't think I've ever shot it with the camera in any of those settings because I can make those adjustments easy enough in Lightroom. I don't want to have the picture lose the quality right at the beginning and then try maybe to get it back through Photoshop, get the color back or whatever. So I always kind of shoot in the standard, straight out. What the camera sees is what the camera is going to photograph. I don't do any in-camera sharpening.
You don't do any in-camera sharpening.
No.
See, I have mine set to normal. But you brought up a good point on the on the black and white, because I had a debate with somebody here recently that said, it does make a difference if you shoot black and white, and I said, no, only if you shoot JPEG. JPEG obviously it will create a black and white image that now is black and white.
Right.
But if you're shooting RAW, it doesn't make any difference. And he goes, oh, no, it makes a difference. So I said, you know what? I've always heard that in theory. I've never actually tried it. So maybe I'm saying something when I don't really know what I'm talking about. So I went out that weekend and shot the same scene in RAW with it turned to black and white. And then it turned to regular color. Brought them back into Lightroom and identical. No difference whatsoever. The black and white setting has that's what I thought it would do. The black and white setting has no difference on the color when you're using RAW.
Okay.
So
interesting.
And what's funny is Lightroom did something funny where it actually put it back to color, and I couldn't find out which one it was, except for I had remembered it was the second one, and that's the only way I knew because they looked exactly the same. So I can make them both white, regular or black and white, and it didn't matter. Okay, so I'm seeing the next thing here is this D-range optimizer. What is that?
Dynamic range, and I just keep that straight on standard as well.
Yeah, and that's something that's not in my camera, but it is in my mom's D90. She has that D-range optimizer. What that's trying to do is bring out some of the shadows and reduce some of the highlights, so they don't get blown out, if I remember right. Is that right, Tim?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But once again, since I'm doing RAW, I don't bother with it, at least.
Yeah, I think this is something maybe if you're shooting JPEG, you might want to look at. It is going to do some processing in the camera that you could do later yourself. So, keep in mind that means the camera's making all those decisions for you and baking them into the JPEG image if you're using that. So if you're fine with that, then you get decent results. That's one thing. Otherwise, you can do those same things in post-processing.
Well, that's exactly the reason I never did it, because I was always like, if it's doing it at the beginning, it's going to be more difficult for me to get something out of it that it was put in there by the camera than to try and adjust it myself in either Photoshop or now Lightroom. I can't say that I was really good with Photoshop, because I think if I use 10% of what Photoshop is, that was a lot, and I think that's probably most people. I'm not doing any graphic editing on it, so that's why when I'm going to Lightroom, and Lightroom does anything that the camera would do, and I think it does it better in my mind, at least.
Yeah. So, one thing. Hey, could you turn off your video? Because I think It's giving you might there must be some bandwidth problems here. Yeah, just leave it off for now until we need to
Okay.
show that. Um, okay, so back to the show here. You have creative style.
Right. Creative style and a creative button. And like I said before, I just leave them both on standard.
Okay.
I don't use them because in my mind, it's all stuff that I'm going to do afterwards. If I want to make any adjustments to a picture, black and white, sepia, highlights, whatever it is, I'm going to do it afterwards.
Now, our menus are somewhat the same, but also quite a bit different because I have a color space that I can shoot in. And I see that you have something called Adobe RGB. Is that where you're choosing your color space?
Yeah.
Because there's Adobe RGB and then sRGB, and I think even when I shoot RAW, I've got to choose one of those two color spaces. Although it may not be making a difference. Which one do you use there?
I use
Standard?
Adobe RGB. I think everything I've ever seen was it sRGB. That's the one that everything I've ever read was not to use it pretty much.
Yeah, sRGB is typically what you're going to output to like the web or to a print or something like that. It is a much smaller color space, where Adobe RGB is a much wider color space. It has a lot more colors in it. So if you're gonna you want to start off with the most amount of colors you can. So I would suggest you shoot an Adobe RGB. And then later, when you go to output to web or to wherever you're going to output, you'll convert it back to sRGB, which is fairly easy to do in Lightroom and Photoshop or any of those things. But you want to start off with as much information as you can. So I do the same thing. I shoot an Adobe RGB. And then you have a custom button. What was that? A button on the front of the camera?
No, it's on the back of the camera, right where I guess my thumb would be up high, but it's down low on the bottom right, so it would be my right hand. If I select that button, it would give me the opportunity to change some of the color spaces right on the fly right there.
Okay. I don't have a picture of the back of your camera right now, but maybe we can look at that later.
I get actually because I saw that's
it's further on.
Yeah, it's one of the other menus, I guess.
Yeah, so we can come to that in a little bit. Next is in your list is exposure step,
right?
And I have this too, so this will cover both of us. And that is, as you were changing your exposure, and that is that your EV setting?
Yeah, so either setting it by a half a step or a third of a stop, and I keep it at a third. I'd rather spin more and get the options versus being limited to a half step.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a reason why they have it there because somebody wants to use it. I'm sure somebody wants to have it set to a half stop, and I think maybe you have this too. I have it that setting also for the ISO, where I can change the ISO or the exposure by half stops rather than third stops. I much rather would have the fine tune ability using the third stop. So, to go one stop, you got to do 3 clicks versus the other setting, which is where you do two clicks. I don't know.
Right. I mean, and I remember my old camera used to have a second dial on the top, and half the dial was third stops, and the other half the dial, if you spun it all the way around, was actually half stops, which I always thought was I was like, I never understood why we wanted to go for either a third or a half a stop versus a third. Why they need to make a dial like that? And same as this. I mean, a third and a half stop. That's a wasted menu item to me. I've left it on a third, and I've left it there probably since I bought the camera.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if anybody else ever uses the half stop. But let's move on. Some of these settings here, like mine, where I don't fool with them much. ISO, you have ISO max. Tell me about that.
The ISO max is, if I'm correct on this, it would be up to a 1600, and if you set it to the max, it'll allow it to go up to 3200.
Okay, this is I'm not sure my camera has this or not. I know the newer one Nikon's do. This is where you're on auto ISO, and you can give it a max and a minimum range.
Right.
And that can be very useful. So let's say you're out shooting soccer, you're out shooting something, and you want to have the ISO move around a little bit for you, but you want it to move within a confined range because you don't want it to get too noisy. So I can. What is your minimum ISO in this camera? 100 or 200?
I'm going to look now. My minimum is 100.
Okay, so it looks like your ISO minimum is 200 to 400 for this auto thing, and then your max on the auto is
It's up to 1600.
400 to 1600. So I can easily see you setting up an auto range of 200 to 800. Let's say if 800 is an acceptable amount of noise for you in an image, then you can set up an auto ISO range of 200 to 800 and have it bounce within those ranges if you go to auto ISO. That's very useful. If your camera has that setting where you can set in the minimum and maximum on the auto ISO, that can be very helpful. I would recommend that you typically stay out of auto ISO. If not, you're going to forget, and then later you're going to pay for it.
Well, I'll tell you, this is one of those menu items for me that is grayed out also, because in manual, I cannot shoot in auto ISO in manual. I have to select the ISO.
Oh, that's right. You were the manual shooter.
I'm the manual guy. Even though this weekend taking pictures of my son's soccer game, I don't shoot in manual. The only thing I did shoot manual was the focusing. I decided to get off the autofocus because every time I would take a picture when he was down on the goal, somebody would step in front of the camera, another player somewhere, and the camera did not focus where I wanted it to.
So wait, hold on. So now you're not only shooting manual exposure, you're shooting manual focus?
Just on soccer now. Baseball I never had to, but soccer, I'll tell you, it was painful. A lot of times I would get a picture of my son. I'd shoot off 6 or 7 shots of him making a save in the net. I'd get to look at the pictures later on. Every single one of them was out of focus.
And you're just total old school there. That's impressive.
Well, I don't do it with the program mode. That I keep an aperture priority for that.
Okay. So did you get a lot of in focus shots?
A lot better this time because I was using my 100 400 and I had it zoomed in pretty close to him, and the lens, while it's a good lens, tends to hunt a lot. So I said, you know what? Let me put it on manual focus, focusing down by where he was, and more often than not, I was able to get the pictures in focus.
Yeah, and now that is something I mentioned before, and I'll talk about it now. Is on my camera. I don't think you have it on your camera, and I'm not. I imagine Canons have this, but I'm not sure. So I'm only talking right now from a Nikon standpoint. Is I have a button on the back that says AF-on, and what that allows me to do is move the focusing from the shutter button to that button that's on the back. So I do all my focusing by pressing that button on the back. And actually I have another one when I turn it vertical. I have another one there. So in that case where you're talking about where you're trying to shoot what were you shooting, a goalie?
Shooting the goalie, yeah.
Shooting a goalie and you kept having players jump in front of you. What I could do is when there's nobody jumping in front of it, focus on the goalie with that button and then let go of that button. And then when I'm ready to shoot, just shoot away. And the focus won't be changed because the people are running in front of them.
See, that's exactly what I would need. And I know Canon does have it because a friend of mine who shoots with Canon, he has that. And that was the first experience I ever had with it. He's like, you got to focus it. And I'm like, how? And he's like, the button on the back. I was like, oh, look at that.
It does take some getting used to, but once you get used to it, it's really nice to use. I really like using it. Okay, so now we're looking at what is this? A page just says page 3, and this is AFA setup.
This is the sub menu. When you're in the menus, there's 4 pages to the record menu. So this is the 3rd page in it. So it's the autofocus area setup. And I have an autofocus button on the back of my camera also, AF/MF, and when I press that, it will disengage automatically the autofocus from the lens so that I can quickly on the fly, even if I have it set up into one of the 4 focus modes, and one of them being manual, the other 3 are continuous, portrait, and I can't even think what the other one is offhand. Single, portrait, and continuous. So it'll disengage the autofocus menu so that I can easily focus right then and there, even if I don't have it set to manual focus. But this weekend I was shooting for the first time really a lot in manual focus, just because I needed to get the shots that I wanted to get.
Okay. And then you have something called priority setup, and I have this thing too. So some of these things are going to be repetitive between the two of us, and that is whether the camera will take a photo even if it thinks it's not in focus.
Right. If it's in autofocus, it actually has to lock the focus. Otherwise, no matter how hard you press it on the shutter, it's not going to take it.
So mine is called something like FPS plus rate, or FPS or just rate, and or maybe it is. I may be confusing things there. I have to go back and look at it. But it's what it's basically saying is, do you want me to try and maintain the frames per second no matter what? So I'll shoot at 8 frames per second or whatever it's set to, even if I think it's not in focus. Or do you want me to try and keep the focus and only take pictures that are in focus? When I first started doing that, it gets a little confusing because you're sitting there trying to take a shot, and you're banging away 3-4 shot burst, and then it stops and it won't take the shot, and that throws me off because for whatever reason it doesn't think it has focus, and probably didn't, but it doesn't have focus, and then it pauses like that, which just throws me off.
Yeah, I have mine set to autofocus priority, just because if it's going to be out of focus a lot of times, there's almost no need for me to take the picture.
Exactly. I think that's something you got to play with. You
Yeah.
probably should try both of them because what was happening. The reason I tried it was I was getting a lot of out of focus shots in soccer, and when I turned that on, of course, my out of focus shots went way down because now it just won't take them if it's out of focus. But it threw me off because it wasn't taking them whenever I wanted it to take it, and that just
Now,
took
this
some
weekend
learning.
I didn't have that problem shooting in manual focus. That doesn't matter; it overrides it.
Yeah.
It's going to take the picture regardless.
Okay, and then now we have a few noise reduction settings. You have a long exposure noise reduction and a high ISO noise reduction. Do you use either one of those?
I use the long exposure noise reduction, and a lot of times when I was down, let's say taking the fireworks shots, and you take a 3-second exposure, it takes another 3 seconds before you can take another shot because it'll be processing the picture. So I do use that, and I also use I keep the high ISO noise reduction on normal.
Okay, so the long exposure, you said you take a 3 second shot, it takes a 3 second after that.
Yeah,
Is
about
that
2 to 3 seconds afterwards.
is that a 1 for 1? So if you shot a 10 second, will it be 10 seconds?
I wouldn't say it would be 10, but it's definitely probably about 6 or 7 seconds.
So
And if I took a 30-second exposure, it's probably about 15, 20 seconds that the
really?
camera's processing it.
So do you think it's taking like another blank image and comparing the two and removing noise or something?
I don't think it's doing that because I think I would hear the shutter activate, but it's definitely doing something. Is it checking for hot pixels in the picture? That's the only thing I can think of is it looking for the hot pixels that are on the sensor to change those afterwards.
If you don't know what hot pixels are when you especially when you take a long exposure of several seconds or maybe even a minute or something like that. The longer you go, the more you're going to have, and that is these pixels that just appear like a really bright, colored spot somewhere, a real tiny colored spot in an image that it's obvious, and you can generally easily get rid of them as long as they're not in a bad spot. I had when with my D100, I went and did it, and I probably had 30 or 40 hot pixels when I went to like a 30-second exposure. But I had found the software that I could then map
Right.
those images. You had to do something where you went in a dark room, put the lens cap on, took this picture, took a reference picture. It found the hot pixels and it mapped them, and then it mapped them out. So now I've mapped out all those hot pixels because these are pixels that typically there's something weak about them, or they're just not right. In a normal shot, they're going to be fine, but in these long exposure shots, their weakness is going to come through. So if you map them out, now they just won't even be used at all. And you think, well, I don't want to throw away pixels, but what is it? 6 megapixels, 6 million pixels.
Yeah.
So if I'm throwing out 30, am I really throwing out that many?
No, not at all.
On
And
a
otherwise, you would have going in and cloning out that in your software program
that's
afterwards
ex-
anyway.
that's exactly what it's having to do. 30 when you map out 30 out of 6 million, that's a small number. When you've got to clone out 30 in every image that you want to use, that's a large number.
Yes,
And
exactly.
it's very painful. So I was more than willing to map out those 30 pixels. You won't even notice. You'll never know that those are gone.
Well, the other thing that people probably would have seen, and I don't think this is as pervasive as it was in the past. My first digital camera, I definitely had an issue near the end of its life cycle with dust on the sensor, and that's the same. And I only saw it like if I had a sky picture or if I had a very flat, neutral background. You would see it's like, ah, darn, there it is. And a friend of mine had that really bad, and he borrowed a camera from his father-in-law, took it over to Europe, took pictures in France, came home, and there was dust, and I mean multiple pieces of dust on every single picture.
Yeah, those things typically only show up if you're stopping down your lens. If you're shooting, at a pretty wide open aperture, they're going to get lost in there. But if you're stopping down f5, 6, f8, even more stop down, they're going to come through.
And he actually was like, I'm just going to get a cotton swab and clean it out. I was like,
Woo.
don't even bother. I was like,
No,
that you may as well just throw it away then at that point.
no, cleaning your own sensors. You better
It's not worth it.
know what you're doing. Be very careful. That's not something I'm going to do. That's not for the average beginning user, that or maybe even some of the more advanced users. That's not something to be taken lightly. I would caution you on cleaning your own sensor. You can really mess it up.
Absolutely. You're going to destroy it.
You can make a bad situation way worse. It's probably better off just sending it off somewhere and having somebody do it and paying that. I actually probably should send all of my cameras off to be calibrated, and while they're there, have them the sensors cleaned. Okay,
Probably
so
not a bad idea.
now we're going into this next section, and this says custom menu.
Correct.
So it's similar to mine, but you got a lot of choices here that I don't have. So maybe we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on some of these, but what is I start trigger?
Well, I think we mentioned this last week. Right under the viewfinder in the back of my camera are two little infrared sensors. So as I bring my eye up to the viewfinder, the camera starts to autofocus already. So it's already it'll do. I mean, normally you'll have to press the shutter halfway down, which I'll do as well. But it'll start focusing as soon as I'm bringing the camera up to my hand, as well as there's a grip on the right hand sensor. It's two little metal bars, and I guess as my hand touches the metal bars, it makes a contact between the two of them to force the camera to start focusing.
Okay. And Andy out in chat says, one way to clean your sensor. This is if you don't actually need to touch the sensor, you can use like a rocket blower. I have one of those. I think it looks like a little rocket ship, and it puts out a lot of air. So you can hold your camera upside down inside where it's with no fan going. I got a fan going right now, with no fan going, and maybe get some of that loose dust that's sitting around in there out by blowing into there with a pocket rocket, whatever it's called.
Well, I'll tell you, I read
Rocket blower.
a couple of things on those, and you just got to be careful. Make sure you keep that clean itself,
Yeah, you don't want to blow
because
more
otherwise you
dust
might be
in there.
blowing dust right on it.
And I would recommend do not blow in there with your mouth.
Nope.
Little particles
Moisture.
of moisture is going to go in there. Do not use one of those compressed air cans. That thing contains oil in it that you may not know is there, but there's little oils in it will just completely ruin your sensor. When in doubt, don't do it.
Exactly.
Okay. Just looking through here, see if there's anything else. Anything else in here that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, most of these other ones, like I said, had the autofocus button on the back of the camera. Drive speed, I keep set to fast, unless actually I probably almost always keep it there. Other than doing a 2-second exposure when I want to prevent any camera shake. Autofocus area display, it'll show. I have it set to 0.6 seconds. When I press down on the shutter halfway, it'll show me which sensor inside the viewfinder is actually focusing. It'll actually highlight it with red, so I can say, all right, the camera is autofocusing on the right half of my scene, is it picking the center focusing, the left or the upper? So it'll tell me which one the camera is choosing, and then I can make a decision: is it choosing the right one, or should I change it?
And what that's doing is showing you, it's highlighting for 0.6 seconds or 0.3 seconds which one it chose.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
What else do I have in here? No, I guess that's release without card, red eye reduction off, exposure compensation. No, that's most of these are just normal. That probably every camera would have. Then, I mean, most of the ones that you use are the ones in the main section, the record section.
All right, so we're going to be able to go through mine much faster because we went through yours. So let's go through here. And mine's not laid out quite the same as yours.
That's why nobody ever switches cameras.
Yeah, now I got to find where is. Oh, here we go. Shooting menu. Let's get this where we can do. So in mine we have a shooting menu bank. So I can. Am I in the right thing? Shooting menu. Yeah. 4 banks, and that's where you can set up different settings. You know, I can have an A setting which has all kind of different menu settings. You know, maybe I have auto ISO turned on that one. Maybe I have exposure compensation turned on that. I can set up these, and I can rename them too. You know, to be 4 different preset settings, and you go into one of those, and it changes quite a bit of different stuff. I don't use that often, but for a while I was doing that when I was shooting a lot of soccer.
Right.
I would use different ones for, you know, where I needed a high ISO or where I didn't need a high ISO or where I wanted auto ISO. So I think I was using 3 of them. I don't think I ever went to the 4th, but that's pretty useful. File renaming, you know, I think I kept it the same except for I have 2 D2Hs, and I changed the name of what it standard names them as, like D2H and then the file number. I changed one of them to say DH2, the file number, and that's, you know, if you're not going to have 2 of the same camera, you probably leave that the same.
Yeah, I just leave mine set as what the camera comes out with, and the only bad thing is after I hit 10,000 pictures, it resets itself to 0 again.
Exactly.
So, but I always change the name of my pictures anyway. So,
and that's, you know, back in before Lightroom, I had a bat file set up to where it would dump them in, it automatically add an extra 0, you know, rename all the files. And then when I flipped over to another 10,000, I would change that bat file to add to 10,000, and I did that for every single file. That got old quick because I got up to like 60,000 images on that camera, and having to keep changing that. But if you don't change that, you're going to end up with the exact same file name for, you know, multiple images. You know, if you shoot 40,000 images, you're going to have, theoretically, unless you deleted something, 4 images with the exact same file name.
Right, and then, I mean, granted,
4 of them, but 4.
I think we probably both put up our. I know, at least I organize all my pictures by the date of the picture was taken in a folder by year, by date, and then within that the file name, which also has a date and then the location. So, but I don't know if everybody does that, and you could run into trouble. But then again, if you're taking 10,000 plus pictures, you're probably doing it.
Yeah, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. And some of these things are generic to, or not generic, or specific to my D2X, like this high speed crop thing. That's not on my D2H. It's probably not on your camera.
I've never even heard of that.
What it is this camera is a 12 or 13 megapixel camera, and I can convert it to where it only uses 6 megapixel and goes to a faster speed. So I can, you know, crop that down in there, and that's. I don't want to spend too much time on that. That's not something people will use unless you have a D2X. Next thing I want to talk about is the white balance. I know if you're outside and it's good light, you know, auto will work fairly good, and a lot of people use that. I typically use 1 or 2 settings, and that is I either just stick it on 5600 Kelvin and just leave it there, and then adjust the white balance when I come inside. I do I guess 3. I said 2, but I think 3. I do a preset where I am setting the white balance off of a gray card, Um, okay, no, that's two. Yeah, two. Either shut it off a gray card or I set up 5600. Those are the two things I do. I generally do not use any of these shady, cloudy, direct sunlight, any of those things. I just use, 5600 or the custom.
Right.
What do you use for white balance?
Uh, I I usually wind up using auto. I just started where I was really going to try this weekend using a gray card at the at his soccer game, and I didn't use it. So I wound up using auto and then adjusting it later on in Lightroom.
And
But I really want to get into custom. I reread Scott Kelby's book on it, and I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to try it. We had talked about it previously, and I was like, that's the next step of something I need to do.
and soccer is where I changed because I had used to shoot on auto, and to be honest, outside in good light, it does fairly good. But what I ended up having because I shot in auto this whole game is that it was different. It was changing throughout the game based on whether a cloud came over, something like that. And it was as you were going through the images, it was noticeable. I think if you were to look at an image individually, I wouldn't have noticed that there would change. But as I was flipping through them, it was changed. So I said, that's it. I'm going to shoot at 5600, or if it's a challenging light, I'm going to shoot with using gray card. And then later, if I'm wrong, since I shoot in RAW, I'll just adjust it later in post. And that that seems that works pretty good. You just also if you don't have the gray card with you, and I generally have it with me, if there's some neutral color around, you can use that.
Yeah, I definitely have not gotten comfortable to the point of picking a neutral color, but I'm going to try the gray card. I'm going to have Jack hold it, take a picture of him before the game, and see how it works. I mean,
see if it's different. Now, one of the things that is really important if you're going to be fooling around with your white balance and post processing is that your your monitor be calibrated.
well, I definitely I use a Huey Pro to calibrate my monitor.
Yeah. And as I mentioned out in chat, if you're using a gray card and your lighting conditions are changing, you're probably gonna have to take multiple readings with that gray card.
Yep.
Because
Well, I think we talked about before getting that. I would actually like to try that that attachment that you put on the front of your lens. I forgot what it was called again.
the Expo disc.
Yeah, the Expo disc. I wonder if that works, because that would be easy to then just take a picture through that to get your white balance.
Yeah. Yeah, and I ran into that same thing Andy's talking about was whenever I was shooting baseball, softball games at night, is, it starts off at let's say 7 o'clock, maybe the stadium lights have not come on yet, and you just have, late afternoon light, that's one light. Then at, 7:15, 7:20, the stadium lights come on. And what happens is for a while, is the balance between the natural light, which is dying, and the stadium lights, which is getting stronger. You got a wide range of white balances there. And if I had taken one white balance setting off of the gray card at the beginning, it wouldn't have been any good toward the end because the light had changed by so much. So it's a good point Andy made, is that in dramatically changing white balance in color settings and in the light settings, that you're going to need to take multiple readings. And I have found that you want to find the weakness in auto, go out and shoot under, like in a gym, basketball.
Sodium lights.
Good
Oh,
God,
forget it.
those lights are horrible. And auto will give you, maybe even in your office, if you have fluorescent lighting, the lighting is just awful, and auto will give you terrible color cast.
Yeah, that's where you better not be shooting in JPEG.
Yeah. Now, we talked about image sharpening. I don't know if we went over it too much on with your camera. On mine, I leave mine to normal. And I know that this, again, is, since I'm shooting RAW, is not necessarily that important. But for me, I like to have a little bit of sharpening as it's coming in. So as I'm reviewing the images in Lightroom, I can see what they look like with a little bit of sharpening. So I leave it to normal. If I was going to shoot in JPEG, I probably would still leave it to normal. I would, my problem with auto, and there's, almost everything has a stinking auto in it.
Yeah.
My problem with auto is you never really know what it's going to do. And you're leaving too much up to the camera to decide, and you're going to get, varying outcomes that if you're not careful, it's going to make things more challenging, I think. So if I was shooting JPEG, I probably would still stick with normal. I'd be worried with any of the highs that, like a medium high or a high, whatever it is, that it would give you too much sharpening. The tone compensation, this is another one I just leave to normal. I don't know what it's called on your camera, but mine has tone compensation. That's where you can add or subtract contrast from the image. I much prefer to do all that stuff in post.
I'm actually looking right now to see where that is, and I can't even find that in mine.
And then again, we have sRGB or Adobe RGB,
Right.
and I keep it in Adobe RGB. Mine has three color modes. First color mode is sRGB only. And that's like I think that's more of a portrait like color space. The number two is actually the one I like the best. I don't know how to describe that one, but number three is meant more for landscapes on my camera, and I stick with the number two. And again, if you're shooting raw, you can change that. Then there's a hue adjustment. Phew, I've never changed that. I've always been 0.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's one of those things where I would not know what to choose while I'm out there, and I'm much more comfortable trying to change something like that later on in Lightroom.
Yeah. Now here's something that I wanted to get to before we get too far into the show, or have to end the show, and that is the interval timer shooting. And your first thought is that's only if you're going to be setting up, the camera and having it take shots, like, take 1,000 shots, one every 30 seconds, something like that, where you're doing like a time lapse thing.
Right.
But there's another use for it, and this is what I use it for all the time, and that's when you're shooting HDR. Be interesting to see how. I hope I'm saying his name right. Ali does it when we talk to him later in the month. But with interval timer, you set it to take one shot. How is it? Well, one shot, one series, or whatever it is. And if you set it on your bracket to take, let's say, a 5 shot bracket, then when it takes its one shot, it'll actually take the 5. It'll take the whole series. So if my Nikon, it's like menu, interval, left, right, down, on, and I've got that down. Now don't write this down and go back and try it. You have to test it yourself. I don't know if I had that exactly right. I just know that the memory of my thumb doing it has it right, and it just kind of does it. Now I don't remember exactly how I do it, but it's basically like that: menu, interval, left, right, down, on, and it's then it takes a shot. So I step back for a second, and bam, it goes through my 3, 5, 7, whatever number of shots I'm taking with HDR, and that's how I use the interval timer. I've never actually used the interval timer the way you'd normally think of it, to take a series of time lapse shots.
Well, I'll tell you, my current camera does not have interval timer, and my old one did. And I had a film camera when I did it. And I actually used it once, and with film, and I'll never forget this. I was a very restless sleeper, and I probably still am. And I remember setting up my camera in my bedroom with a flash to take pictures of me like every 45 minutes, and it actually worked. It was probably the only time I ever did it, but and it was amazing how much I did move throughout the night. But the way I use my camera for what you're talking about, because when I do HDR, I also do that. But what I do instead is I use in the drive setting, I have bracketing either single shot advance or continuous advance. So I'll take 5 shots with continuous, where I just press the shutter speed once, and it'll shoot off the same scene real quickly, 5 shots in about, I guess, a second and a quarter, to get the pictures out. So I guess it's the same thing, but it's not called interval timer. I mean, the interval timer for me is where you set it to take a picture every 5 minutes or whatever, to watch like a flower blooming or whatever you want to do.
Well, that's what this is an interval timer to do that, except that you're using it to take just one shot. And then it's instead of taking one shot, it's taking the bracket.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's how I took because I don't always have when I took the HDR pictures, I didn't always have a tripod with me. So it's like, I'm going to hold it as tight as I can to my face, just press the shutter once and take 5 quick shots, and hopefully it'll line itself pretty close.
Yeah. So now we're on to what is called custom settings on mine. And that is where we're getting into some of the focus things, the AFC, which is autofocus continuous or autofocus single. If I if I'm going to, gosh, I don't think I ever switch to AFS. I'm always on autofocus continuous. I may be on single shot mode where I'm using a flash, but I'm almost always on autofocus continuous. I don't think I've ever used the other way. Then I have something called lock on, and that is, when it's focus tracking, when you have like a soccer player that's running, you have the ability to, to have it lock focus and move with that player, and also it will do a little bit where if the player goes right a little bit off of the focus point you're on, has the ability to know using the other focus points where that person generally was and try and maintain that focus on that player. It's not as magical as it sounds, but I typically leave that on, and I think there's now I'm looking at the menu they have here on this, and this is DP review. If you ever want to go and do a camera review, and before you buy one, DP review is one of the best places to go.
Absolutely.
And my mom has had problems with her camera, and she goes, I don't know how to change this. And I will, while she's talking, pull up her camera on DP review, search through her menu, and say, okay, go to this menu, go here, go there. She will say, well, how are you doing that? You're not. Do you have my owner's manual? I said, no, I got DP review. I'm looking at your menu right here. So, so that's very helpful. But I'm looking at here. I think this is before they came out with a firmware update for my camera, because now I have like focus tracking long and focus tracking short, where it will try and maintain the focus longer or shorter. And I've played with both of them and got mixed results through both.
Well, I'll tell you, I like that that one you had with the autofocus lock, where it'll lock in on a certain player, and I don't have that, and I wish I did.
Yeah, we'll get that in a second. Andy out in chat has a question. He's asking time-lapse HDR. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm using the time-lapse setting to take my HDR, but it's taking it immediately. So if I'm taking a 5 bracket set, I go to that time-lapse thing, and I've got it set to take one image, one series, or 1 second from now. I think that's what it is. Every 1 second, take one image, and for a total of 1 images. And so what it will do is it'll go out there and take that one, what it says is 1 image, but since I have bracketing turned on, it'll take actually all 5. So, it'll take the first one, then immediately take the second one, and so on. And it has that 1 second, or I may have it set on 2 or 3 second delay, just so I can get my hands off the camera and have it settle down for a second. So it does that slight delay, then takes the series of images. And now going back to what you were saying, that this is called is on my camera. If you're looking at the screen now, it's A5, the autofocus activation, and I can have it set to where it's on the shutter, and the AF on button, so I can use either one, or I can have it set to where it's only on the AF on button on the back of my camera, and that's where I have it set. So right now, if you were to push the button on the front of my camera with a shutter button, it would not focus at all. There's no focus there at all.
Now, why wouldn't you want to do it that way as well?
Well, because of what we were just talking about. So, when we had that soccer player.
Oh, that's right.
If I had to focus on that front button, every time I'd press it, it'd be changing.
It would change on you.
Yeah. So, like, if I'm taking a batter, who's there batting, and I wanted to have the focus already set, and I might have people walking in front of them as they're getting ready to bat and that kind of stuff, or just some movement, or I'm afraid the camera is going to focus on the fence behind them or something like that. The AF1 button, when you get to start using it, you'll really like it. It's really nice. It does take a little bit of getting used to. And also, since this camera has the vertical shutter button, I have it turned on vertical too. We've pretty much gone over all of the exposure and the compensation, so we don't need to go over that again. Self timer. I do have. I don't have the screen on the back of the camera, the LCD on the back of the camera, where it displays the image every time I take one. I've got to actually hit the play button to see it. So I did that back when I was taking a lot of shots, because I did not want that LCD to display every image and use up battery.
I actually have mine set to come on, and half the time I'll switch between looking at the picture and looking at the histogram on the picture just to see if my exposure is where I want it. But I have it set it on. I never have an issue with the battery. I easily can take probably about 700, 800 pictures before my battery's completely exhausted. And before that time comes, I have a spare battery with me, and I'll find an outlet somewhere. So
Yeah, see, when I was shooting soccer for that lady, 800 pictures would be 4 games. So by the end of the day, I might have shot 16 games or something like that, and I would have run out of even my second battery. So I was looking for ways to,
oh yeah, then you got to
maintain
find
battery.
ways to.
Yeah. Okay. Now this next thing, and this is kind of hidden. It's so far deep into the menu, but I think now I'm trying to remember which way this goes. But what it is called the file number sequence. And my mom had this one set up wrong, where every time she put the card in the camera, it started the number sequences over again. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've seen that in my camera had that as well, and I did not want that.
She had that. I think that was the auto. It might have been the default setting. Is that it
Wow.
renumbered and God, that caused her all kind of chaos and confusion. Now, if you're, I know. See, if you're
Yeah,
shooting,
mine on the file number, it's got series and reset, and I have mine set to series, so it just continues all the way up. Otherwise, reset would be when I put the compact flash card in, or if I reformat it, would start from 1 again.
yeah, that's something. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, is when you get your new camera, is just go through the menus, refer back to the manual, as needed. But this is one of those things I always look for, because I don't want it to start the numbers over again whenever I put a new card in. So this is one I seek out anytime I get a new camera, is that file number sequence, or renaming, whatever they call it for that camera, because I want it to continue that. It will, flip over when it hits 10,000, but that's fine. Because if what I'm doing, like you had said before, is I'm storing my images by year, by day. I think is how I was doing it within Lightroom. So the fact that more than likely I won't shoot 10,000 images in one day, so that won't be a problem.
Most likely.
Yeah, hasn't happened yet. There was a guy. I remember talking to a guy on DP Review who was going through a camera about every other month, because he had wore out the mirror. He was
my
shooting,
God.
Yeah, he was shooting over 100,000 images a month. Like, dear God, what are you? Get a video camera. What are you doing?
Yeah, really.
And
I can't even imagine. I mean, how are you editing that many pictures? What do you just got your finger down constantly?
he could not have been editing. But take a guess at what he was shooting. You'll never guess. I shouldn't put you in that kind of spot.
I guess it's cars or.
No, he was shooting his Pomeranian dogs, or whatever what are those little dogs called?
Yeah, I know which one. Oh, the little ones. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, he was shooting his little dogs. Everywhere they went, he took tons of pictures of them.
And what's he going to do with the pictures?
I don't know. There were some of them were really good. He was a fairly good photographer, so he would get some pretty good shots. But back in the day, he was getting D2X, D2H. These are $5,000 cameras, and he would wear them out in 2 months.
Wow. Well, see, I'd be sending it back to Canon or Nikon, saying, "Camera wore out. Why?"
They will look at it and say, "That's because in 2 months you shot 350,000 images."
Yeah, really.
By the way, we can tell they were all of your dog.
Yeah. Wait a second. My flash card's not in there.
Yes.
Andy, I agree with you. He is nuts. Absolutely.
Stop taking 300,000 pictures of your dog.
Yeah, I think he has a problem.
Yeah. I hadn't been on DP Review in the forums in a long time, so I don't know, whatever became of that guy. But obviously, he must have had some money somewhere, so he could keep buying these expensive cameras, take pictures of the dog. I think that I'm looking for. Oh, here's another thing I wanted to talk about. Is on my camera, and I don't know if you have this, but I have a couple of buttons on the very front of the camera, right next to the lens. One of them is a depth of field preview, and I don't think I can remap that. But
Yeah, I have the same, and I don't think I can remap that either.
I have another one that's a function button, and that one I can remap. And some of the things I can do with that is I can create different metering modes. So I normally have mine set on matrix metering, but I can set that to center weighted, spot metering, whatever else. I can also set it to, that this button, I can set it to flash on and off. I can set it to high speed crop. I have it set to when I push that button, and you got to hold it in. I don't think it's a set and release. I think it's you got to hold it in. It is set to spot metering. So if I need to spot meter something, I just press that button in, and now I have a spot metering. On my camera, I also can have a setting to where if you press that button and rotate a command dial, it will do something. So I have it set to change to the high-speed crop mode. So I can change in and out of the high-speed crop mode pretty fast.
Well, I'll tell you, your camera has a heck of a lot more settings than my camera does. And for somebody who says he doesn't go through the manual, you got to at some point read. You're not going to know everything. But I guess if you keep using Nikons, a lot of it is repetitive over one camera to the next. They'll have something new once in a while. But man, there's a lot of settings. And I mean, just looking at some of the minute settings they have in there, am I going to change the speed of the shutter from 6 shots per second to 2 shots or 3 shots? That seems a little bit
Yeah, where did I see that? Yeah, so on mine I can have I have a continuous high and continuous low, continuous high and continuous low.
right. That's what I
shutter
have.
button. And these are actual dials on the camera, on top of the camera, and I can the continuous high is its max. It's going to go full out, which I think on this camera is 8 frames per second. But I can define what continuous low is, and that can be anywhere from 1 to 7 frames per second. I don't know. I think I have mine set on probably 7.
Yeah, I was going to say I can't see myself. I mean, if you said maybe 1.3 or 1.47, yeah, okay, maybe I can see that. But I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a lot.
Yeah, I guess they do that because you never know what somebody's going to want. Because to be honest, I don't know what mine's set right now. But I've used 5.
Simple software too. So
Yeah, that's all it is, just software. So I think that covers the main topics I wanted to go over, and let's see what they're talking about in chat.
they want some of the money.
The guy who shoots 300,000 shots of his dog, he wants them to send. I want him to send some money too. I'd love to have a Nikon D3S. If he can buy me one of those, or maybe a D2X, D3X, that'd be awesome. Okay, so as now we're over time, let me go to my tip. And that is this website. So let's see if I can full screen this. Not that. Zoom out. Let's see what this looks like in chat before I go too much. Give it a second. This is, and I'll put the name in the show notes. It's cameras. Let's see, camera sim
Simulator.
camera. Yeah, camerasim.com. Camerasim.com. And this is good for a beginning photographer, because what you can do is you got this little girl here who's got what are those little windmill things that they hold? That spins with the wind.
Right.
And that's giving you some motion. It also, if you look at it, you can see it looks like, the photographer holding the camera is moving a little bit. There's a little button here where you can place it on a tripod. When you do that, the movement of the photographer is taken out. You can set the distance from you to the subject, to be further and closer. You can set the focal length of your lens, what kind of lighting it is, the ISO, the aperture, the shutter speed, all those things. And when you press, snap on the shutter button, it then shows you what the image would look like. So in this case, I took a shot at f11, ISO 200, 1/25 of a second. So it was enough to freeze her, but her little windmill she was holding, it was not enough to freeze. So, if I went to like ISO, I'm in shutter priority. Let's go to aperture priority. So we can go to aperture priority. We can go down to f4, ISO 200. So this is one thousandth of a second, and there we stop the movement of that windmill. This is a good thing for somebody to go out and play with, and try different settings, and you can see what kind of difference it makes. I remember this one thing it doesn't do a good job of is depth of field, because I was talking to somebody the other day, and actually somebody had asked a question. I'm having trouble getting images in focus when shooting wide open. And another person said, well, here's how you look at it. If you're at f3.5, you have 3.5 feet in focus. I said, that's not right.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. That's
you can't yeah, and Stephen put the link out in chat to this place. You can't convert your f-stop to feet that are in focus. That's not a one-to-one relationship. There may be a situation where that is, but that's going to be by pure luck. The things that are going to affect your depth of field is your distance to subject, your focal length, your aperture. I think that's it.
correct. I think that's it.
Yeah.
But this does, I mean, if you change it, I just went into aperture priority, and if you change it to f2.8 and all the way up, and then you actually got to snap the picture. The whole background is blurry, and then if you change it and go to f25, the background is completely in focus.
Yeah,
so it actually worked.
You're right. It doesn't show it to you whenever you're.
Right. It doesn't have a depth of field preview button, I guess.
Yeah.
You actually have to snap the picture. So this is good. I actually like this.
The other thing this shows you, and that's good for a beginning photographer, is right now I'm in aperture priority. So as I'm moving the aperture up and down, the shutter speed is changing too. And what that's showing you as a beginning photographer is the camera is trying to maintain the right focus. So for every stop, or half stop, third stop, whatever you have this set, whatever this is set to, for every change you do, the shutter changes by an equal amount in the opposite direction to maintain that same that same exposure. If you flip the manual mode where you can change one thing without changing the other, then you can get some underexposed shots. And that's it. You can play with that here too. So this is a very good little tool, for the beginning photographer to try out.
I'll tell you, even when you bump up the ISO to 1600, you can see the grain. I actually like this. This is a pretty. I tried to get this to work the other day on my iPad, and I couldn't get it up. I guess it's running by Flash, so the iPad wouldn't run it. So.
Yeah, and even though I know all these things already, it was fun for me to play with, just playing around with. But I think that this is something that my wife maybe can use to kind of get that feel for the relationship. I think for probably Stephen and Andy and out in chat and you and I, Tim, we understand for every change in the aperture there's a change in shutter or a change in the exposure. But some of the beginning photographers don't realize that relationship.
Right.
And this will help you with that. And also it shows you, as far as the movement, two things: the windmill moving, paying attention at what shutter speed does it take to stop that, but also your own movement. If you don't have this on a tripod, you're moving around a little bit. And you may be better or worse than what this simulator is, as far as how low you can hold it and still get a sharp image. But, so check that out. Okay, and Stephen actually saw, I think I put this on the Facebook page. Stephen saw it there and checked it out. All right, that's my tip, Tim.
All right, my tip goes along with what we were talking about today, and that's the settings of your camera. And I think everybody that changes settings on their camera has probably done this in the past, where they've taken pictures, come back later on, looked at them, said, "Oh my God, the ISO was set to X, Y, or Z," and every single picture, and usually because you have the ISO set up high, is grainy. So just before you start taking your pictures, especially if you're going to take a lot of pictures, just quickly review the settings. Most of the priority settings that I have are right on the back LCD of my camera, whether it's the LCD or the ISO. The ISO or the white balance. It'll say it right on the back of the camera what I have it set to, and I'll just take a quick glance at it to make sure it is not something that is way off the charts of what I wanted. So just take the step back in time, Spend that extra 5 seconds before you start taking pictures.
Okay, yeah, very good. Because I've done that. Andy was asking who hasn't done that. I've done
Yeah,
I've done that where shot a whole series at ISO 1600 or 800, wondering what the heck? Why am I getting such high shutter speeds?
exactly.
Yeah. All right. That ends show number 11. I think I've mentioned all the news, the guests we have coming up, and all that. So Andy and Stephen, be back next week. We'll have Rachel on, who's going to talk to us about some things. I think she wrote an article on why you should use RAW. So I know we'll go over that, but we won't beat the RAW thing to death. But since she wrote that article, I want to talk to her a little bit about that, and then we'll talk to her about what type of photography she does, and what else she does. If you go out to the forums, I'll add a link to her blog and to her website, so you can read that there. And of course, I'll put another post out on Facebook and Twitter and Google Plus. So, follow us on Facebook, jpeg2RAW, on Twitter, we're jpeg2RAW, and on Google Plus, Tim and I are there as individuals. I'm there as Mike Howard. Tim, you're there as Tim Kemperle.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if they're allowing businesses to have their own site yet. So I don't think you could. You're not supposed to have a site called jpeg2RAW on Google Plus. I'm sure that's going to be coming, but right now, just search for me. If you follow me, add me to a circle. Let me know you're coming from as a friend from jpeg2RAW, so I can add you into a circle and follow you, because like I mentioned, I think I'm up to 1,200 followers, and I do not have a clue where most of those are coming from. So you'll get lost in a shuffle, and when 30 or 40 of them happen in a day, I just don't know. I'll lose it. So also, if you're interested in doing that Google Plus Hangout, send me an email at jpeg2RAW, a podcast at jpeg2RAW, and let's talk about setting up some times, get that going. I think that can be very useful. I really want to try out that new thing with the desktop sharing. That would be awesome, because what we could have done tonight, Tim, is flip over to you, have you do it, flip over back to me, if it's working the way I think it is. I haven't tried it yet, because if it's working that way, that's actually better than what Skype does. We'll give that a try. All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in.